Everyone in Amafe knew Yugo, not because he was special or smart, though he was, but because people loved making fun of him. His classmates called him Ugly Boy like it was his name, and the village kids laughed whenever he walked by. If it wasn't his crooked teeth, it was his uneven skin. If it wasn't his lanky body, it was his awkward walk. And if it wasn't any of those things, they'd just make something up to laugh about. But what hurt Yugo the most wasn't the teasing. It was the fact that nobody seemed to care how he felt. Not even his mother. "Yugo, look at you." Mama's voice carried through their small, tin-roofed house one morning as she scolded him, pointing at his rumpled school uniform. "You can't even iron your clothes properly. And your shoes, eh? Do you want people to think I raised a useless child?" "I'm sorry, Mama," Yugo mumbled, staring at his feet. He'd been up late studying for an exam and had forgotten to polish his worn-out school shoes. But his apology didn't stop her. "Sorry won't make you a man. You're 17. When will you start acting like one?" She shook her head and turned away, muttering to herself about how she was tired of this embarrassment. Yugo didn't argue. What was the point? Mama was always like this, quick to point out what was wrong with him but never what was right. He grabbed his school bag and left the house before she could say more. At school, things weren't any better. The moment Yugo walked into the dusty compound, his classmates spotted him. "Ah, ugly boy don't show," yelled Chitty, the class clown. He leaned against the mango tree where the boys liked to gather before the bell rang. "Yugo, when you go fine. Maybe next life, eh?" The others laughed, slapping their knees like Chitty had just told the funniest joke in the world. Yugo pretended not to hear and kept walking toward his classroom. His heart sank, but he forced his face to stay blank. If he showed them he was hurt, it would only make things worse. "Yugo," Chitty called after him, grinning like a troublemaker who just spotted a fresh opportunity. "Wait first. I hear say even your manhood's small." "Not true." The laughter exploded. Girls giggled behind their hands, and even some of the boys doubled over. Yugo froze, his face burning. He wanted to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't come. How could he argue when even he didn't feel good enough about himself? All he could do was walk away, his shoulders heavy with shame. Yugo's day dragged on after that. He tried to focus on the lessons, but his mind kept replaying Chitty's words. It wasn't the first time someone had teased him about his manhood, and he doubted it would be the last. The rumors weren't even true, but who would believe him? He was ugly boy, and that was all anyone cared about. The only relief came during English class. Miss Ifioma, the new teacher, was nothing like the others. She was kind and patient, and she didn't treat Yugo like a joke. When she called on him to answer questions, she smiled in a way that made him feel, just for a moment, like he wasn't invisible. "Yugo," she said that day after he gave the correct answer to a tricky question, "that's excellent. Well done." Her words warmed him in a way he couldn't explain. For a second, he forgot about Chitty and the laughter. He even forgot about his mother's scolding. Miss Ifioma had seen something good in him, and that was enough to carry him through the rest of the day. But the relief didn't last. After school, as Yugo walked home along the dusty path lined with palm trees, he heard voices behind him. It was Chitty and his gang again. "Yugo, wait," Chitty called, running up with two other boys, their faces full of mischief. "Why you day rush? You know what make we follow you?" Yugo didn't answer. He knew they weren't there to be friendly. "You know they talk again?" Chitty teased, falling into step beside him. "Abina, because of wetin we talked this morning? Don't worry, ugly boy. Maybe one day you go grow." The others laughed, and one of them added, "But even if you grow, no woman go ever notice you. Who go look your face twice?" Yugo clenched his fists but kept walking. He'd learned a long time ago that fighting back only made things worse. They'd stop eventually, he told himself. They always did. But this time they didn't. They kept following him, throwing insults and laughing until Yugo reached his compound. Only then did they leave, their laughter echoing in the distance. That night, Yugo sat in his small room, staring at the cracked wall. He felt like a prisoner in his own life. No matter what he did, people would always see him as the ugly, awkward boy who wasn't good enough. And the worst part? Maybe they were right. He thought about Chitty's words, the teasing about his manhood, the laughter that followed. It wasn't true, but it didn't matter. In a mafe, rumors could become truths if enough people believed them. Yugo's heart ached at the thought. He wished he could change something, anything about himself so people would finally stop looking down on him. That was when he remembered Bob and Kim. Everyone in a mafe knew about the old herbalist. Some said he was a fraud, selling fake charms to desperate people. Others swore his potions and amulets could solve any problem, no matter how impossible. Yugo had never believed in those things before, but now he wasn't so sure. If Bob and Kim could help him, wasn't it worth a try? His heart pounded as the idea took root. He could go to Bob and Kim and ask for help, something to make him better. Handsome, maybe, or just confident, or even bigger. If it worked, maybe people would finally stop laughing. Maybe even Miss Ifioma would notice him for more than just being a good student. Yugo sat up, his decision made. Tomorrow he would visit Bob and Kim. What did he have to lose? The next afternoon, Yugo found himself standing outside Bob and Kim's hut, his palms sweaty and his heart racing. The herbalist's home sat at the edge of the village, surrounded by thick bushes and the kind of silence that made Yugo's skin crawl. He hesitated, wondering if this was a bad idea. But then he remembered Chitty's laughter, his mother's scolding, and the way people avoided his eyes when they spoke to him. Yugo swallowed his fear and stepped forward. The inside of the hut was dark and smelled like a mix of herbs and something burnt. Bob and Kim sat on a low stool, his wrinkled face lit by the glow of a small fire. He looked up as Yugo entered, his eyes sharp and curious. "Who are you and what do you want?" the old man asked, his voice low and rough. I need your help," Yugo stammered, feeling small under the man's gaze. Bob and Kim raised an eyebrow. "Help? What kind of help?" Yugo hesitated, then blurted, "I want to be better, to be bigger, and for people to notice me." For a moment, Bob and Kim said nothing. Then he leaned back and chuckled, a dry sound that sent shivers down Yugo's spine. "Better, the herbalist said, his eyes gleaming. "You want women to notice you, to stop feeling like the small boy they laugh at." Yugo nodded, his face burning with shame. He didn't know how Bob and Kim had guessed, but he didn't care. If the man could help, that was all that mattered. Bob and Kim stared at him for a long time, then finally stood and shuffled to a shelf lined with bottles and charms. He pulled out a small amulet and a bottle of dark liquid, turning back to Yugo. "This," he said, holding them up, "will make you what you want to be. It will enhance everything about you, your confidence, your presence, even your body. Women will flock to you. Men will respect you. But remember," he paused, his eyes narrowing, "power comes with a price. Are you ready to pay it?" Yugo hesitated, but only for a moment. He thought about his mother's disappointment, Chitty's taunts, and Miss Ifioma's kind smile. If this charm could change his life, then yes, he was ready to pay. "I'm ready," he said, his voice steady. Bob and Kim smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Then drink this tonight and wear the amulet always. But be careful, boy. Be very careful." Yugo nodded, clutching the charm and bottle like his life depended on them. As he left the hut, his heart pounded with a mix of fear and hope. For the first time in a long while, he felt like his life was about to change. He just didn't know how much. That night, Yugo sat on the floor of his small room, staring at the amulet Bob and Kim had given him. It looked ordinary, just a small, round object tied to a thin leather string. The bottle of dark liquid sat next to it, its contents sloshing gently every time Yugo bumped the floor with his knee. He hadn't told anyone about his visit to the herbalist, not even his mother. She wouldn't understand. She'd call him foolish and tell him to pray instead. But Yugo didn't want prayers. He wanted results. Real, visible results. His heart pounded as he reached for the bottle. Bob and Kim's words echoed in his mind. "Drink this tonight and wear the amulet always. But be careful, boy. Be very careful." The warning made him nervous, but he pushed the feeling aside. He'd already decided this was his only chance to change his life. With trembling hands, Yugo uncorked the bottle. The smell hit him first, sharp and bitter, like burnt leaves mixed with something metallic. He gagged but forced himself to take a deep breath. "You can do this," he whispered to himself. "You have to do this." He tipped the bottle to his lips and drank. The liquid was thick and bitter, coating his tongue and throat like oil. Yugo coughed, nearly spilling the rest of the potion. His stomach churned, and for a moment he thought he might vomit. But he didn't. He closed his eyes and swallowed hard, forcing the potion down. Almost immediately, he felt a strange warmth spread through his chest. It wasn't unpleasant. More like a soft fire that started small and grew steadily. It moved down to his stomach, then his arms and legs, and finally settled in his head. Yugo blinked, confused. The room seemed brighter, sharper, like someone had turned on a light. And then it was over. The warmth faded, and everything felt normal again. Yugo sat there for a long time, waiting for something else to happen. When nothing did, he sighed and tied the amulet around his neck. It rested against his chest, cool and solid, like a tiny anchor. He touched it once, then lay down to sleep. The next morning, Yugo woke up feeling different. He couldn't explain it, but something about him felt stronger, more alive. When he looked in the mirror, his reflection seemed sharper, like it wasn't trying to hide anymore. His crooked teeth were still there, and his skin wasn't magically smooth, but there was something new in his eyes, a confidence he hadn't seen before. His Manhood was bigger and his trousers couldn't hide the bulge. He got dressed and headed to school, the amulet hidden beneath his shirt. As he walked, he noticed little things. The breeze felt cooler, the sun warmer, the sounds of the village sharper. Even the path under his feet felt more solid, like it was holding him up instead of letting him sink. When he entered the school compound, the usual laughter and teasing didn't come. Instead, people stared, not in the mocking way they used to, but with curiosity. Chitty and his gang were under the mango tree as usual, but they didn't call out. Instead, Chitty squinted at Yugo, like he was trying to figure something out. "Yugo," one of the girls said, running up to him. It was Amara, a classmate who usually ignored him. She smiled brightly, her white teeth shining in the morning sun. "You look different today. Did you do something new?" Yugo stammered, caught off guard. "No, I didn't do anything." "Well, whatever it is, it suits you," Amara said, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Anyway, see you in class." Yugo stood there, stunned. Amara had never spoken to him like that before. She usually giggled with her friends when Chitty teased him, but now she was smiling at him, complimenting him. He noticed how she stole glances at his trousers and how her face turned red every time as she was very light in complexion. Yugo touched the amulet under his shirt and felt a jolt of excitement. Maybe the charm was working. The real change happened during English class. Miss Ifeoma walked in, her usual calm and confident self. She smiled at the class and began the lesson, her soft voice filling the room. Yugo listened intently, as he always did, but today, something was different. Every time Miss Ifeoma's eyes met his, she seemed to pause. Her smile lingered, and her voice softened. "Yugo," she said after a while, "can you answer this question?" Yugo stood, feeling the weight of everyone's eyes on him. Usually, he hated this part of class, the way people stared, waiting for him to make a mistake. But today, he didn't feel nervous. The words came easily, and when he finished, Miss Ifeoma's smile widened. "Very good," she said, her voice warm. "You're really improving." Yugo sat down, his heart racing. He glanced around the room and noticed something strange. The girls weren't whispering or laughing. They were smiling at him. "Meet in my office after class," Miss Ifeoma said. Even the boys looked confused, like they couldn't figure out what was happening. Yugo touched the amulet again and felt a spark of pride. The charm was definitely working. By lunchtime, Yugo's confidence had grown. He walked into the schoolyard with his head high, something he hadn't done in years. And for the first time, people didn't ignore him. Girls waved and smiled. Boys nodded in acknowledgement. Even Chitty seemed unsure of what to do. "Yugo," Chitty called, jogging up to him. His tone was different, less mocking, more curious. What's going on with you? You look bigger. More, he gestured vaguely. You know what I mean. Yugo shrugged, trying to act casual. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't lie, Chitty said, narrowing his eyes. You're hiding something. Maybe you're just imagining things, Yugo said, brushing past him. He didn't stop to see Chitty's reaction. For once, he didn't care. Yugo went to Miss Ifeoma's office that afternoon. Miss Ifeoma called him close to her chair and kissed him. It was sudden, but he liked it. Then he slept with her. The rest of the day was a blur. Everywhere he went, people noticed him. Even teachers who usually ignored him seemed more interested. Madame Beezy, the strict mathematics teacher, called on him 3 times during her lesson, each time nodding in approval when he answered correctly. Missy Carrette, the married PE teacher, stopped him after class to ask how he was doing. A question she'd never asked before. Yugo, she said, her voice soft. Can I talk to you for a moment? Yugo froze. His heart pounded as he turned to face her. Yes, Ma. Mrs. Carrette smiled, her eyes warm and kind. I just wanted to say that you've been doing really well lately. I've noticed a change in you, and it's a good one. Keep it up. Okay? Yugo nodded, his cheeks burning. Thank you, Ma. She hesitated, as if she wanted to say more, but then she smiled again and walked away. Yugo watched her go, his heart racing. For the first time, he felt like someone saw him. Not ugly boy, but Yugo. Eventually, he slept with all the female teachers, including Principal Amina. When Yugo got home that evening, his mother barely noticed him. She was busy cooking and complaining about how the price of rice had gone up again. Yugo didn't mind. For once, he didn't need her approval. He went to his room, closed the door, and sat on the bed, holding the amulet in his hand. The charm was working. It wasn't just his imagination. People were noticing him, listening to him, treating him differently. And it wasn't just because of his confidence. There was something more. He couldn't explain it, but he didn't need to. All that mattered was that things were finally changing. As he lay down to sleep, Yugo felt a flicker of excitement. This was only the beginning. Tomorrow would be even better. The next day, Yugo woke up with a strange feeling. Something like excitement and fear mixed together. He couldn't stop thinking about how differently people had treated him yesterday. Even his usual bullies had seemed unsure of themselves around him. And then there was Miss Ifeoma. The way she smiled at him, the way her voice softened when she spoke. It felt like a dream he didn't want to wake up from. As Yugo got dressed, he glanced at the amulet hanging around his neck. It felt heavier today, like it carried something more than just the charm Bob and Kem had promised. He touched it, and a shiver ran down his spine. Be careful, boy. Be very careful. Bob and Kem's words echoed in his mind, but Yugo pushed them aside. He wasn't doing anything wrong. The charm was just making things better. When Yugo arrived at school, the air felt different, like something was buzzing around him. As he walked through the gates, heads turned. Girls whispered and giggled, their eyes darting toward him. Even the boys who usually ignored him nodded in acknowledgement. It was as if he had stepped into someone else's life. Yugo! A voice called from behind him. He turned to see Amara running up to him, her braids bouncing as she moved. She smiled, her face bright and eager. Good morning. How are you today? I'm fine, Yugo said, surprised by her friendliness. How are you? I'm great, she said, falling into step beside him. Are you ready for the math test today? Everyone says it's going to be hard. Yugo shrugged, trying to act casual. I think I'll manage. I'm sure you will, Amara said, her eyes shining. You're really smart, you know. Before Yugo could respond, Chitty appeared out of nowhere, blocking their path. His expression was a mix of curiosity and irritation, like he couldn't decide whether to laugh or be serious. Amara, Chitty said, his tone sharp. Why are you talking to him? Amara frowned, crossing her arms. Why not? What's your problem? My problem. Chitty smirked, looking Yugo up and down. My problem is that everyone's acting like this guy is some big deal all of a sudden. What's so special about him? Yugo felt a flash of anger but kept his face calm. Maybe you're just jealous, he said, his voice steady. Chitty's smirk faltered, but he quickly covered it with a laugh. Jealous? Of you? Don't make me laugh. Amara rolled her eyes. You're just being childish, Chitty. Let's go, Yugo. She grabbed Yugo's arm and pulled him past Chitty, who stood there, his mouth open in shock. As they walked away, Yugo couldn't help but smile. For once, he wasn't the one being humiliated. The morning passed in a blur of lessons and whispered conversations. Every time Yugo answered a question in class, people turned to look at him, their faces full of admiration. Even the teachers seemed more interested in him than usual. Madame Beezy, who was known for her strictness, actually smiled when Yugo got an answer right during her math class. Very good, Yugo, she said, nodding in approval. You're really improving. Keep it up. It wasn't until lunch break that things took a stranger turn. Yugo was sitting under a tree, enjoying the cool shade, when he saw Miss Icaret walking toward him. She was the PE teacher, a tall, confident woman with a smile that could light up a room. Yugo had never spoken to her outside of class, so he was surprised when she stopped in front of him. Yugo, she said, her voice soft and playful. How are you today? I'm fine, Ma, Yugo said, standing up quickly. Good afternoon. Miss Icaret smiled, tilting her head. No need to be so formal. I just wanted to check on you. You've been doing so well in school lately. It's nice to see. Thank you, Ma, Yugo said, feeling his cheeks grow warm. Miss Icaret stepped closer, her eyes searching his face. You're growing up to be quite a young man, Yugo. Very impressive. Yugo swallowed, unsure of what to say. Her words felt different. They weren't like the kind compliments Miss Ifioma gave him. There was something deeper, something that made his heart race and his palms sweat. Before he could respond, Miss Icaret reached out and touched his arm lightly. Keep it up. Okay? I'll be watching. With that, she walked away, leaving Yugo standing there, his mind spinning. He touched the amulet under his shirt, his fingers trembling. What was happening? Why was everyone acting so different? The rest of the day was filled with similar moments. Madame Beezy stopped him after math class to tell him how proud she was of his progress. Principal Amina, who usually didn't say much to students, gave him a rare smile when she passed him in the hallway. And then there was Miss Ifioma. After school, Yugo was gathering his books when Miss Ifioma called him to her desk. Her smile was warm, but there was something in her eyes that made Yugo's stomach flip. Yugo, she said, her voice soft, I've noticed a lot of changes in you lately. You seem more confident, more sure of yourself. It's a good thing. Thank you, Ma, Yugo said, his heart pounding. Miss Ifioma leaned forward slightly, her gaze locking onto his. I just want you to know that if you ever need anything at all, you can come to me, okay? Yugo nodded, his throat dry. Yes, Ma. She smiled again, her eyes lingering on his for a moment before she straightened up. Good. Now go on. I'll see you tomorrow. That night, Yugo sat on his bed, staring at the amulet. It gleamed faintly in the dim light, its surface smooth and cold against his fingers. The charm was working. There was no doubt about it now. But it wasn't just giving him confidence or making people notice him. It was doing something more, something deeper. He thought about Miss Icaret's touch, Madame Beezy's smile, and Miss Ifioma's lingering gaze. They weren't just being kind. They were drawn to him in a way that made his chest tighten and his head spin. He thought about how slept with all of them and how they praised his manhood. Yugo's heart pounded as he realized the truth. The charm wasn't just making him more confident or attractive. It was making women want him. And for the first time, Yugo felt a flicker of fear. What had Bob and Kem said? Power comes with a price. What price was he going to pay? Yugo woke up the next morning with a heavy feeling in his chest. The excitement from the last few days was gone, replaced by a strange mix of guilt and confusion. Everything was happened so fast. Too fast. The way Miss Icaret had touched his arm, the way Madame Beezy smiled at him, the way Miss Ifioma's eyes lingered. It wasn't normal. It wasn't right. He touched the amulet under his shirt, its cool surface pressing against his skin. Bob and Kem's warning rang in his ears. Power comes with a price. What was the price? And was it worth paying? At school, the whispers started before Yugo even stepped into the compound. He could feel the eyes on him as he walked through the gates. The way people leaned in to talk, their voices low but urgent. Did you hear? One girl whispered to another. Missy Carrette and Madame Beezy. They're acting so strange around Yugo. Even Principal Amina, the other girl, replied. She actually smiled at him yesterday. Have you ever seen her smile before? Yugo's ears burned as he walked past them, pretending not to hear. He didn't want to think about it. He just wanted the day to pass quietly. But as soon as he entered the classroom, Chitty was waiting for him. Yugo, Chitty called, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. Our big man is here. How far? The class burst into laughter, but it wasn't the usual mocking sound Yugo was used to. This time, there was something different in their tone, something almost respectful. Yugo didn't know whether to feel relieved or worried. Chitty walked over, a sly grin on his face. Oya, tell us, what's your secret? How are you making all the teachers lose their heads? I don't know what you're talking about, Yugo said, trying to keep his voice steady. Chitty laughed. Ah, see this guy. You think we don't see what's going on? Missy Carrette, Madame Beezy, even Miss Ifioma. They can't stop looking at you. You're like a magnet for women now. Leave me alone. Chitty, Yugo muttered, pushing past him to his seat. But Chitty wasn't done. He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. Or is it true what people are saying? That you've got? You know, he gestured vaguely with his hands, a smirk on his face. Something big. Yugo froze, his heart pounding. He glanced around the classroom, but no one else seemed to be paying attention. Still, the way Chitty's grin widened made him feel exposed, like his secret was written all over his face. I don't know what you're talking about, Yugo said again, this time more firmly. Chitty laughed and patted him on the shoulder. Okay, but don't forget us when you're famous. Big man like you. The morning dragged on, each lesson feeling longer than the last. Yugo couldn't focus. His mind kept replaying Chitty's words, the whispers in the schoolyard, the looks from his teachers. It was like a storm was building, and he was standing in the middle of it, powerless to stop it. By lunchtime, the storm broke. Yugo was sitting under the tree where he usually ate his lunch when Madame Beezy approached him. Her expression was calm, almost too calm, as she stopped in front of him and crossed her arms. Yugo, she said, her voice low and serious. We need to talk. Yes, Ma, Yugo said, standing up quickly. Madame Beezy glanced around, making sure no one was listening, then leaned in slightly. I don't know what you're doing, but it needs to stop. Yugo blinked, confused. What do you mean, Ma? You know exactly what I mean, she said, her eyes narrowing. The way I have been acting, the way Missy Carrette has been acting, the way Principal Amina looks at you, even Miss Ifioma, this isn't normal. Something is going on, and you're at the center of it. I'm not doing anything, Yugo stammered, his chest tightening. I swear, Madame Beezy sighed, her stern expression softening just a little. Listen, Yugo, I don't know what's happening, but you're playing with fire. If people find out about this, whatever it is, it won't end well for you. Do you understand? Yugo nodded, his throat dry. Yes, Ma. Good, she said, stepping back. Be careful, Yugo. For your own sake. As she walked away, Yugo felt like the ground had been pulled out from under him. Madame Beezy was right. Whatever was happening, it wasn't normal. And it wasn't going to stay a secret for long. That afternoon, the whispers grew louder. Everywhere Yugo went, people stared and talked. He tried to ignore it, but it was impossible. By the time school ended, he felt like he was suffocating. He needed answers, real answers, which was why, instead of going home, Yugo found himself standing outside Bobinkem's hut again. The old man was sitting on his stool, grinding herbs with a stone, when Yugo entered. He looked up, his sharp eyes studying Yugo carefully. So, Bobinkem said, his voice low and gravelly. You've come back. Yes, Yugo said, stepping forward. I need to talk to you. About what? The charm, Yugo said, pulling the amulet out from under his shirt. It's doing things. People are acting strange. They're saying things, looking at me differently. I don't understand what's happening. Bob and Kem chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. What did you expect, boy? You wanted power. Power to make people notice you, to make them want you. And now you have it. But it's too much, Yugo said, his voice rising. I didn't ask for this. I just wanted people to stop laughing at me. I didn't want, he trailed off, his hands shaking. I didn't want this. Bob and Kem leaned back, his eyes gleaming. Power is never what you think it will be. It's a beast, boy. Once you feed it, it grows. And it doesn't stop growing. Yugo felt a chill run down his spine. Can't you stop it? Take it back? The old man shook his head. You can't unspill water, boy. The charm is yours now. What happens next is up to you. But, Yugo's voice cracked. What if it gets worse? It will, Bob and Kem said simply. The question is, what will you do about it? When Yugo left the hut, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the village. His head was spinning, his heart heavy. He didn't have any answers, only more questions. As he walked home, he couldn't shake the feeling that the storm was far from over. In fact, it was only just beginning. Yugo barely slept that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the faces of his teachers. Madame Beezy, Miss Ikaret's lingering touch, and Miss Ifeoma's warm but intense gaze. The words Bob and Kem had spoken echoed in his head. Power is a beast. Once you feed it, it grows. The charm had given him everything he thought he wanted. People noticed him now. They respected him, even feared him. But it wasn't just admiration, it was obsession. It was wrong, and he didn't know how to stop it. By the time the sun rose, Yugo had made a decision. He couldn't carry this alone anymore. He needed to tell someone. Someone he trusted. And the only person who came to mind was Miss Ifeoma. Yugo didn't have to hear the exact words to know what people were saying. They were talking about him, about the way the teachers acted around him. Some of the boys smirked when he walked by, as if they were jealous. The girls watched him with curious, shy glances. But it was the teachers who worried him the most. During English class, Miss Ifeoma hardly looked at anyone else. Every time she asked a question, her eyes found Yugo, as if he was the only one in the room. When the bell rang and the students began to leave, she stopped him at the door. Yugo, she said, her voice soft but firm, can you stay for a moment? I need to speak with you. Yugo's heart raced. He nodded, clutching his bag tightly as the rest of the class filtered out. When the room was empty, Miss Ifeoma gestured for him to sit. How are you doing, Yugo? She asked, sitting across from him. Her tone was gentle, but there was something else in her eyes. Something he couldn't quite place. I'm fine, Ma, Yugo said, though his voice shook. Miss Ifeoma tilted her head, studying him. You don't look fine. Is something bothering you? Yugo hesitated. He wanted to tell her everything, but the words felt heavy in his throat. What if she didn't believe him? What if she thought he was crazy? But then he remembered the way she'd always treated him, with kindness, with understanding. If anyone could help him, it was her. Ma, he began, his voice barely above a whisper. There's something I need to tell you. But you might not believe me. Miss Ifeoma leaned forward, her eyes softening. You can tell me anything, Yugo. Promise. Yugo swallowed hard, then pulled the amulet out from under his shirt. It gleamed in the sunlight streaming through the window, its smooth surface cool against his skin. This, he said, his voice trembling, is why everything is happening. Miss Ifeoma frowned, her gaze flicking between Yugo's face and the amulet. What do you mean? What is that? It's a charm, Yugo said, gripping it tightly. Bob and Kem gave it to me. He said it would make me better, more confident, more attractive, and it did. But it's doing more than that. It's making people act differently, like they can't control themselves. Miss Ifeoma's eyes widened, but she didn't interrupt. Yugo took a deep breath and continued. At first, it felt good, he admitted. People stopped laughing at me. They started noticing me. But now it's too much. The teachers, the students, everyone is acting strange. And I don't know how to make it stop. There was a long silence. Miss Ifeoma stared at the amulet, her expression unreadable. Finally, she spoke. "Yugo," she said slowly, "are you saying that this charm is responsible for the way people have been behaving?" Yugo nodded. "Yes, Ma. I know it sounds crazy, but it's true. Bob and Kim warned me that power has a price. I didn't understand what he meant at the time, but now I do. I didn't want this, Ma. I just wanted people to stop laughing at me." Miss Ifeoma sighed, leaning back in her chair. "Oh, Yugo," she said, her voice filled with a mix of sadness and frustration. "Why didn't you come to me sooner? Why did you go to Bob and Kim in the first place?" "I was desperate," Yugo said, his voice cracking. "I was tired of being called ugly boy. I just wanted to feel like I mattered." Miss Ifeoma shook her head, her eyes glistening. "You do matter, Yugo. You've always mattered. You didn't need some charm to prove that." Tears stung Yugo's eyes, but he blinked them away. "I'm sorry, Ma. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I don't know what to do anymore." Miss Ifeoma reached across the table and placed a hand on his. "It's going to be okay, Yugo. But we need to fix this. We need to tell someone." "Who?" Yugo asked, panic rising in his chest. "If people find out, they'll hate me even more. They'll think I'm a freak." "They won't," Miss Ifeoma said firmly. "But we can't keep this a secret. The longer it goes on, the worse it will get. Do you trust me, Yugo?" Yugo hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, Ma." "Good," she said, squeezing his hand. "Then leave it to me. I'll talk to the other teachers. We'll figure this out together." That afternoon, Miss Ifeoma called a meeting with Madame Beezy and Miss Ikaret. Yugo waited outside the staff room, his heart pounding as he imagined what they were saying. He could hear their voices, low and urgent, but he couldn't make out the words. After what felt like hours, the door opened, and the three women stepped out. Madame Beezy's expression was stern, but there was a hint of concern in her eyes. Miss Ikaret looked shaken, her usual confidence replaced by a nervous energy. And Miss Ifeoma, she looked determined. "Yugo," Miss Ifeoma said, motioning for him to follow. "Come with us." They led him to the principal's office, where Principal Amina was waiting. Her sharp eyes scanned the room as the teachers explained what was happening. Yugo sat quietly, his hands clenched in his lap, as they recounted everything he had told them. When they finished, Principal Amina leaned back in her chair, her expression unreadable. For a long moment, no one spoke. "Yugo," she said finally, her voice calm but firm, "is this true?" "Yes, Ma," Yugo said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I swear it is." Principal Amina studied him, her gaze piercing. Then she sighed and turned to the teachers. "This is a serious matter," she said. "If what Yugo is saying is true, we need to address it immediately. But we need to be careful. If word gets out, it could cause a lot of trouble. I am pregnant and Yugo is the one I slept with." "What?" the women screamed in surprise. "I think I'm pregnant too," Madame Beezy said with her eyes on the ground. There was silence everywhere. Then Miss Ifeoma and Mrs. Ikaret confessed too. Miss Ifeoma said she had been vomiting lately and having early morning sickness but felt she was just sick. "What do we do?" Miss Ifeoma asked. Principal Amina's lips pressed into a thin line. "We'll need to bring this to the village elders. They'll know how to handle it." Yugo's heart sank. The elders? That meant the whole village would find out. He wanted to protest, but he knew it was too late. The secret was out, and there was no turning back now. The village square was packed by the time Yugo arrived, his heart pounding like a drum in his chest. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over the crowd of villagers. People whispered and pointed as Yugo followed Miss Ifeoma and the other teachers to the center, where the elders sat in a semicircle on wooden stools. At the center of the elders was Chief Alhaji Bello, his gray beard flowing like a river. His stern face scanned the gathering crowd, and when his sharp eyes landed on Yugo, the boy felt a chill run down his spine. Behind the elders, a group of older women, including Mama Zainab, the respected elder of the Women's Council, sat quietly, their expressions unreadable. "Quiet!" Chief Bello's deep voice boomed, silencing the murmurs. We are here to discuss a serious matter. Let us begin. The first to speak was Principal Amina, who rose with the air of someone who knew the weight of her words. Elders of Amaif, she began, her voice calm but firm, we have gathered here because of a troubling issue involving one of our students, Yugo. There have been unusual events at the school that require your attention. What kind of events? Chief Bello asked, his eyes narrowing. Principal Amina hesitated, then nodded toward Miss Ifioma. Miss Ifioma, please explain. Miss Ifioma stood, her voice steady but tinged with emotion. Elders, we've noticed strange behavior among some of the staff, including myself. This behavior seems to be unnatural, as though we are being influenced by something beyond our control. The crowd murmured in confusion, but Chief Bello raised a hand, silencing them. Continue. Miss Ifioma took a deep breath. The cause of this behavior, we believe, is a charm. Yugo has admitted to obtaining it from Babankem. At the mention of Babankem, the crowd erupted. Some gasped, others whispered furiously. Babankem's name was enough to stir unease in even the bravest villagers. Silence! Chief Bello thundered. When the crowd settled, he turned to Yugo. Is this true, boy? Did you go to Babankem for a charm? Yugo swallowed hard, his throat dry as sand. He could feel every pair of eyes on him. Yes, sir, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I did. And why? Chief Bello's tone was sharp, demanding answers. Yugo hesitated, his hands trembling. Then, with Miss Ifioma's encouraging nod, he spoke. I was tired of being laughed at, tired of being called ugly boy. I wanted to be noticed, to feel like I mattered. So I went to Babankem, and he gave me a charm. He said it would make me better. Better? Mama Zainab's soft voice broke through the tension. Her expression was gentle but firm. Explain what you mean by better. Yugo's cheeks burned. He said it would make me more confident, more attractive. And did it? Chief Bello asked, his voice laced with suspicion. Yes, Yugo admitted, but it did more than that. It made people act differently. It made them want me in ways I didn't understand. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. The elders exchanged glances, their faces grim. Chief Bello leaned back, stroking his beard thoughtfully. Then he turned to one of the villagers. Bring Babankem. A few men disappeared into the crowd, and moments later, Babankem was dragged into the square. His thin frame seemed frail, but his sharp eyes glinted with defiance. Why have I been brought here like a common thief? Babankem demanded, his voice cracking with indignation. Chief Bello fixed him with a hard stare. Babankem, you stand accused of creating a charm that has disrupted the balance of our village. Is this true? Babankem's lips curled into a sly smile. Disrupted the balance? I gave the boy what he asked for. He wanted power, and I gave it to him. Is it my fault that he didn't understand the price? The crowd erupted again, but Chief Bello silenced them with a wave of his hand. Explain yourself, Babankem. What kind of charm did you give this boy? Babankem shrugged. A simple amulet. It enhances what is already there. Confidence, physical presence, even attractiveness. But power like that doesn't come free. It draws people in, makes them act on desires they might usually suppress. The boy wanted to be noticed. Now he is. And you didn't think to warn him about the consequences? Mama Zainab asked, her voice sharp. I did warn him, Babankem said, his tone defensive. I told him power comes with a price. He chose to pay it. Yugo's hands clenched into fists. I didn't know it would be like this, he shouted, his voice breaking. I didn't know it would hurt people. Babankem turned to him, his expression cold. And now you do. That is the lesson of power, boy. It's not about what you gain. It's about what you lose. The words hung in the air like a heavy cloud. The crowd murmured uneasily, and even the elders seemed shaken. Chief Bello finally spoke, his voice firm. Babankem, your actions have brought chaos to our village. You will answer for this. But first, we must decide how to fix the damage. What can we do? One of the elders asked. The charm has already been used. Can it be undone? Bob and Kem hesitated, then nodded. It can be neutralized, but it will take a cleansing ritual, and the boy must willingly give it up. All eyes turned to Yugo. The weight of their gazes pressed down on him like a mountain. He touched the amulet around his neck, his heart pounding. Giving it up meant going back to being invisible, to being ugly boy, but keeping it meant hurting more people, causing more chaos. I'll give it up, Yugo said finally, his voice steady despite the fear in his chest. I don't want this anymore. The ritual was set for that evening, at the village shrine. As the crowd began to disperse, Mama Zainab approached Yugo, her eyes kind but firm. You've made the right choice, my child, she said. But remember, this is only the beginning. True strength comes from within, not from charms or potions. You must find that strength in yourself. Yes, Ma, Yugo said, his voice quiet. As he watched her walk away, he felt a strange mix of relief and fear. The storm was far from over, but for the first time, he felt like he was beginning to find his way through it. The air was thick with tension as the villagers gathered at the shrine that evening. The orange glow of the setting sun cast long shadows across the clearing, and the distant sound of drums echoed through the air. Yugo stood near the altar, clutching the amulet in his trembling hands. Bob and Kem stood beside him, preparing the herbs and items needed for the cleansing ritual. The elders formed a circle around the shrine, their faces serious. Chief Bellow's deep voice broke the silence. Tonight, we will end this chaos. Bob and Kem, do what must be done. Bob and Kem nodded and turned to Yugo. Are you ready, boy? Yugo hesitated. His chest felt tight, like a knot was pulling him in every direction. Giving up the charm meant losing everything he'd gained, his confidence, the attention, the respect. But then he thought about Miss Ifioma, about the pain and confusion he'd caused her and the other teachers. He thought about Madame Beezy's warning, the whispers at school, and the way the village looked at him now. I'm ready, he said, his voice steady despite the fear. Bob and Kem held out his hand. Give me the amulet. Slowly, Yugo removed the leather string from around his neck. The amulet felt heavier than ever in his palm, as though it didn't want to be let go. For a moment he hesitated, his mind racing. What if this was his only chance to matter? What if he went back to being invisible, to being ugly boy? Yugo, Miss Ifioma's voice broke through his thoughts. She was standing at the edge of the circle, her eyes filled with kindness. You can do this. You're more than this charm. You always have been. Her words felt like a warm hand on his shoulder, steadying him. With a deep breath, Yugo placed the amulet in Bob and Kem's outstretched hand. The herbalist held it up, inspecting it in the flickering light of the torches. This charm is strong, Bob and Kem said, his voice low and serious. It has tied itself to the boy's spirit. Removing it will not be easy. What does that mean? Mama Zainab asked, her tone sharp. Will it hurt him? It might, Bob and Kem admitted. But if we do not break its hold, the effects will grow worse. The charm is like a weed. If left unchecked, it will choke everything around it. The crowd murmured uneasily, but Chief Bellow raised a hand for silence. Proceed, he ordered. Bob and Kem turned to Yugo. Sit at the altar, he instructed. Yugo obeyed, his heart pounding. Bob and Kem placed the amulet in a small clay bowl filled with herbs and poured oil over it. He began to chant, his voice deep and rhythmic, the words ancient and unfamiliar. The villagers watched in tense silence, their eyes fixed on the scene before them. The chanting grew louder. Yugo felt a strange sensation in his chest. It started as a faint tug, like someone pulling on a thread, but it quickly grew stronger. His breath hitched, and he clenched his fists to steady himself. Hold still, Bob and Kem said without pausing his chant. The tugging turned into a sharp pain, like a hook was being dragged through him. Yugo gasped, his body trembling. What's happening? He cried, his voice breaking. The charm is resisting, Bob and Kem said, his tone calm but firm. Do not fight it. Let it go. I'm trying, Yugo shouted, tears streaming down his face. The pain was overwhelming, like a storm raging inside him. He felt the weight of every decision he'd made, every moment of desperation that had led him here. Miss Iphioma stepped forward, her voice urgent. Yugo, listen to me. You're strong enough to do this. You don't need the charm. You never did. Her words cut through the chaos in his mind. Yugo gritted his teeth, focusing on her voice. Slowly, the pain began to ease. The pulling sensation lessened, and the storm inside him quieted. Bob Kem's chanting reached a crescendo. He lifted the clay bowl and poured its contents onto the fire at the center of the altar. The flames roared, shooting sparks into the night sky. A sudden gust of wind swept through the shrine, extinguishing the torches. For a moment, everything was still. Then the fire settled, its flames calm and steady once more. Bob Kem lowered his hands, his voice falling silent. It is done, he said, his tone heavy with finality. Yugo slumped forward, exhausted but alive. The weight that had clung to him since he first took the charm was gone. He felt lighter, freer, like he could finally breathe again. Miss Iphioma rushed to his side, kneeling beside him. Are you okay? She asked, her voice full of concern. Yugo nodded weakly. I think so. The crowd erupted into murmurs, some of relief, others of lingering unease. Chief Bello stood, his expression solemn. Bob Kem, he said, you have caused great harm to this village. Your actions have brought suffering and chaos. For this, you will no longer practice your craft here. Bob Kem's face hardened, but he didn't argue. He simply nodded, his shoulders slumping as he turned to leave. Before he left, he did another cleansing ritual for Yugo classmates and the teachers. The ritual made the teachers lose the pregnancy since it was conceived out of a charm. The villagers began to disperse, their voices a mix of relief and gossip. Mama Zainab approached Yugo, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. You have shown great courage tonight, she said. But remember, this is only the beginning. True strength is in how you move forward from here. Yes, Ma, Yugo said, his voice quiet but steady. As the clearing emptied, Yugo sat by the dying fire, staring into the flames. Miss Iphioma stayed beside him, her presence a comforting anchor. You did the right thing, Yugo, she said softly. I'm proud of you. Tears welled in Yugo's eyes, but this time, they weren't from fear or shame. Thank you, Ma, he said, his voice trembling. For everything. As Yugo walked home under the stars, he felt a strange sense of peace. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, he felt like he could face it. Without the charm, without the lies, without the weight of trying to be someone he wasn't. He was Yugo, and that was enough. The days after the ritual were quieter, but Yugo could still feel the weight of the past weeks lingering in the air. People in the village didn't look at him the same way anymore. The stares and whispers hadn't stopped, but they were different now. Some looked at him with pity, others with curiosity, and a few with something that felt like respect. At school, things weren't much easier. The boys who used to tease him now kept their distance, unsure of how to act. The girls who once giggled behind his back now avoided his gaze, as if they weren't sure who he was anymore. And the teachers, especially Miss Iphioma, treated him carefully, like they were afraid he might break. Yugo, Miss Iphioma called one afternoon after class. Can I speak with you? He nodded, his heart sinking a little. He had spent the entire week trying to focus on his studies, but his mind kept drifting back to everything that had happened. Talking to Miss Iphioma felt both comforting and heavy at the same time. She gestured for him to sit across from her desk. How are you feeling? Yugo shrugged, unsure how to answer. I'm fine, Ma. Miss Iphioma raised an eyebrow, her lips curving into a small smile. You don't have to lie, Yugo. It's okay to say if you're not fine. He looked down at his hands, picking at the frayed edge of his school uniform. I don't know, he admitted. Sometimes, I feel like things are better, but other times, he paused, struggling to find the right words. It's like everyone's waiting for me to mess up again. Miss Iphioma leaned forward, her voice soft. They're not waiting for you to mess up, Yugo. They're just trying to understand. What happened was unusual, to say the least. People are curious, but that doesn't mean they think badly of you. But what if they do? Yugo asked, his voice cracking. What if they think I'm just a stupid boy who made everything worse? You're not stupid, Yugo, Miss Iphioma said firmly. You made a mistake, yes, but you owned up to it. You faced the consequences and you're trying to do better. That's what matters. Yugo looked up at her, his chest tightening. Do you really believe that? I do, she said, her eyes steady and sincere. But the question is, do you believe it? Her words stayed with him long after he left the classroom. That night, as he lay in bed staring at the cracked ceiling, he thought about everything that had happened. The charm, the chaos, the ritual. It all felt like a bad dream, but the lessons were real. He couldn't change what had happened, but maybe he could change what came next. Instead of going straight home, he went to the village square. A group of younger boys were playing there, kicking a tattered football around and laughing loudly. Yugo watched them for a moment, his heart pounding. Then he stepped forward. Hey, he called, his voice uncertain. The boys stopped, their eyes wide as they turned to face him. Yugo could see the curiosity in their faces, the questions they didn't dare to ask. Do you want some help? He asked, nodding toward the ball. The oldest boy, a lanky kid named Tund, frowned. Why do you want to play with us? Yugo hesitated, then took a deep breath. Because I know what it feels like to be ignored, and I don't want anyone else to feel that way. Tund exchanged a glance with the others, then shrugged. Okay, but you better not mess up. A small smile tugged at Yugo's lips. I'll try. Over the next few weeks, Yugo spent more and more time with the younger boys. He helped them with their homework, played games with them, and listened when they talked about their own struggles. At first, they were hesitant, unsure of his motives. But slowly, they began to trust him. One afternoon, as they sat under the mango tree, Tund looked at Yugo and asked, Why are you doing this? You're older than us. You don't have to care. Yugo thought for a moment, then said, Because I've made mistakes. Big ones. And I don't want you to make the same ones. I want you to know that you're enough just as you are. Tund frowned. But people still laugh at us sometimes. How do you ignore that? You don't, Yugo said honestly. It hurts. But you remind yourself that their opinions don't define you. What matters is how you see yourself. The boys nodded slowly, their expressions thoughtful. For the first time, Yugo felt like his words meant something. Like he was making a difference. One evening, as Yugo was walking home, he ran into Mama Zainab. She was carrying a basket of yams, her steps slow but steady. When she saw him, she smiled. Yugo, she said, her voice warm. You're doing good work with those boys. I've been watching. Thank you, Ma, Yugo said, his cheeks flushing. Mama Zainab placed a hand on his shoulder. You've come a long way, my child. But remember, this is just the beginning. True strength is in how you continue to grow. Yes, Ma, Yugo said, his voice steady. As he walked away, he felt a sense of peace he hadn't felt in a long time. For the first time, he wasn't chasing approval or trying to prove himself. He was simply living, learning, and becoming the person he was meant to be. Months passed, and the village began to heal. The whispers faded, replaced by quiet respect. People still remembered the scandal, but they also saw how Yugo had changed. He was no longer ugly boy or the boy with the charm. He was just Yugo, a boy who had made mistakes, learned from them, and found his own strength. One day, as Yugo walked through the village square, he saw a younger boy being teased by a group of older kids. The boy's head was down, his shoulders hunched as he tried to ignore their taunts. Yugo's chest tightened. He remembered that feeling all too well, the helplessness, the shame, the anger. Without thinking, he stepped forward. Hey, he called, his voice strong and clear. Leave him alone. The older kids turned, their laughter fading as they saw Yugo. There was something in his stance, in his eyes, that made them pause. Why should we? One of them asked, his tone defensive. Because you don't know what he's going through, Yugo said firmly. And because you can be better than this. The kids hesitated, then muttered something under their breath and walked away. Yugo crouched down next to the boy, who was staring at him with wide eyes. "You okay?" Yugo asked gently. The boy nodded, though his eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Thank you," Yugo smiled. "It's okay. Just remember, you're stronger than you think." As Yugo walked away, he felt a warmth in his chest. The path ahead was still uncertain, but he wasn't afraid anymore. He had found his strength, not in a charm or in what others thought of him, but in himself. And that was enough.